All right, in modern football, there's this one word you hear all the time, pressing. You know, that super high energy, in-your-face strategy that just completely suffocates opponents. And the common thinking is pretty simple, right? The more you press, the better your team is. But what if that's totally wrong? What if the teams that seem to be running the hardest are actually just running in circles? Let's get into it. And this quote right here, it's basically the key to a whole new way of looking at the game. It completely flips the script. We go from asking, how much did they run, to, okay, but what did all that running actually get them? You see the difference? It's all about being effective, not just being busy.
So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to bust this myth of more. Then we'll look at a new way to measure what really matters. We call it ASR. We'll even get into the science of why pressing is so physically tough. After that, we'll lay out a blueprint for a smarter press, and by the end, we'll hopefully shift our whole mindset from volume to value.
Okay, so let's start with the idea that's everywhere. You know, the one we see commentators and fans raving about every single weekend. Just relentless, non-stop pressing. And look, it's exciting to watch. It looks super impressive, and it just feels like the sign of a really dominant, hardworking team.
And this number? 326. This pretty much sums up that whole philosophy. We looked at over 800 matches, and we found that these super high-intensity teams, think of clubs like Lens and Arsenal, can hit 326 pressing actions in a single game. That's insane. It means 326 separate times a player is sprinting at an opponent to try and win the ball. Just think about the sheer amount of energy that takes.
So that leads us to the big question, right? Does the team that presses the most actually win the ball back the most? I mean, you'd think so. All that running has to pay off, doesn't it? Well, when we dug into the data from all those matches, we found something that might surprise you. The answer is no, not at all.
And that's exactly why we have to stop just counting stuff and start actually measuring things. If counting how many times a team presses doesn't tell us the whole story, then what should we be looking at? We need something that measures success, not just, running around. So let me introduce you to something called the Activation Success Rate, or ASR for short. The idea is actually really simple, but it's super powerful. It just asks, when a team decides to go for it and initiate a press, what percentage of the time do they actually get the ball back? See? It shifts our whole focus from effort to the actual outcome.
And wow, when you start looking at the game through this ASR lens, the numbers are just staggering. I mean, just look at this chart. You've got these elite teams like Juventus who convert almost 90% of their presses. 90%! And then on the other end of the scale, you have teams like Real Betis who are only successful about 72% of the time. That might not sound like a huge gap, but that 18-point difference is everything. It's the difference between a perfectly organized hunt and just a chaotic, messy chase.
Okay, let's make this super clear with a little puzzle. Which of these two teams is actually better at pressing? Team A is your typical high-energy team, pressing 326 times but only succeeding 75% of the time. Team B, on the other hand, presses way less, only 200 times, but when they go, they succeed 90% of the time. So which team system would you rather have?
It's got to be Team B, right? And it's not even a close call. Just think about it for a second. Every time Team A fails their press, which is a quarter of the time, it's the worst possible outcome. They're wasting a ton of energy, players get dragged out of position, massive gaps open up in their defense, and for what? They don't even get the ball. Team B gets a better result with way less risk and way less running.
So that begs the question, why can't a team just do both? Why not press 300 times and have a 90% success rate? Well, the answer isn't in tactics, it's in biology. There are real hard limits on the human body that make that kind of thing physically impossible.
Okay, so performance scientists say that anything over 25 kilometers per hour is a full-on sprint. And when a player hits that speed to close someone down, something really fascinating happens inside their brain.
For about 3 to 5 seconds, that player basically enters a communication blackout. Their brain is so laser-focused on the physical act of sprinting at top speed that it literally can't process complex tactical thoughts. And this is so important. It means you can't decide to press while you're already sprinting. The decision has to be made before you even start. It has to be completely automatic, like a reflex. If a player is thinking, should I go now? It's already too late. The chance is gone.
And this idea of automatic programmed actions leads us to another really surprising discovery we've found in the data. And it has to do with the players you would never expect to be the key to a great press, the center backs. Yeah, this is where it gets kind of weird. Check this out.
We found that out of all the players on the field, center backs sprint the least, and I mean by a long shot. And get this, they have the highest rate of winning the ball back. How does that even make sense?
Well, it's because their job isn't to start the press. Their job is to hold the entire defensive shape together. They're the anchors of the team. So while all the chaos is happening up ahead of them, they just hold their ground, ready to either clean up the mess if the press fails or collect the ball when it succeeds. If a center back decides to join the chase and leaves that huge hole behind them, it's game over. Absolutely catastrophic.
All right, so that's the theory. But how do you actually build this in the real world? Let's talk about a blueprint. How do those elite teams, the ones hitting 90% ASR, actually design a pressing system that works with these physical limits, not against them?
Well, it really boils down to 4 key things. 1, you need a super precise trigger, not just a vague plan. 2, everyone needs a specific assigned role. 3, you have to train it over and over and over until it's second nature. And 4, and this one is just as important, you have to clearly define who should not join the press.
And here's what I mean by a precise trigger. A coach saying, let's press high up the pitch, that's just a general idea. It's vague. It causes hesitation. But a coach saying, the second their goalie gets a back pass while he's under pressure, we go, that is a specific, clear trigger. It's like a traffic light that suddenly turns green for the entire team, all at once. That's how you make it automatic.
So when you start to piece all of this together, you realize it calls for a totally new way of watching and thinking about the game. We really need to stop praising what is essentially just headless running and start looking for smart, coordinated, intelligent plays.
So here are your key takeaways. Next time you're watching a game, try this. First, look for the ASR, the efficiency, not just the raw number of presses. Second, remember that the best presses look automatic because they are. They've been drilled into the players. Third, watch those center backs. See how they act as the anchor? And finally, notice how the really smart teams don't press all the time. They pick their moments, maybe just 2 or 3 perfect, trained triggers per half.
At the end of the day, it's really all about changing our mindset. It's about learning to see past the flashy stats like distance covered or number of sprints and looking for something deeper. We need to look for those calculated, super efficient, and absolutely devastating moments that actually win or lose a football match. It's all about finding the value, not just counting the volume.
And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. Pressing is just one example of this, right? So what other stats in football, or hey, in any sport, are we all obsessed with that really just measure effort, but tell us almost nothing about whether a team is actually successful? What other big ideas are we getting wrong?